Probably one of the biggest surprises to come out of last year for me was The Suicide Squad, a kind of quasi-sequel slash reboot of the original Suicide Squad, which had basically been torpedoed by a disastrous combination of studio interference, reshoots and scripting problems. Then Warner had the bright idea of bringing in James Gunn to get the franchise back on track, in much the same way they'd hoped that Joss Whedon would turn Justice League into the next Avengers. The difference here is that James Gunn actually succeeded. The Suicide Squad turned out to be a pretty fucking good movie, with well-written characters, decent action scenes, and a dark, violent sense of humour that gelled perfectly with the subject matter. And one of the standout characters for me was Peacemaker, a kind of deranged Captain America who, in his own words, cherishes peace, no matter how many men, women, and children he has to kill to get it. He was played with a perfect combination of goofy, gung-ho earnestness, deadpan humour, and cold, ruthless efficiency by John Cena of all people. And if you stuck around for the post-credits scene, then you'd discover he wasn't quite as dead as he seemed, and in fact, his story was going to be continued with a Peacemaker TV series. Now, I have to admit, I was kinda lukewarm about the idea of giving this guy his own TV show. Much like Harley Quinn, he felt like the kind of character who works best in small doses. Could the Peacemaker gimmick really be sustained over an entire season? Could a guy like John Cena really hold up a show by himself, without a bunch of talented stars to hide behind? Would James Gunn's trademark style translate over to TV? The answer, surprisingly, is yes.
No way!
I mean, there's definitely a few caveats to that, and a couple of times when the message becomes irritatingly intrusive, but generally speaking, Peacemaker was a fun, entertaining show that manages to find just the right balance of humour and drama, and makes the most of a pretty talented cast. So what the fuck, let's dive right in. The show picks up a few months after the events of the Suicide Squad, where a freshly recuperated Peacemaker gets discharged from hospital. Pretty quickly, the show establishes the kind of mundane existence that Peacemaker actually lives when he's not out killing people. He stays alone in a shitty trailer park, he's estranged from his racist father who looks down on him as a failure, and his only friends are a pet bald eagle and a lunatic Deadpool wannabe named Vigilante. Both of which turn out to be fucking awesome, by the way. Anyway, it's not long before he's approached by a top secret government organisation to take part in something called Project Butterfly. He's given very little information about the mission itself because Peacemaker's job is to act as hired muscle. Basically, kill the people they want dead and don't ask too many questions. And since his only other option is to go back to jail for the rest of his life, he reluctantly accepts the team's offer. Needless to say, there's a lot more to this team and Project Butterfly than meets the eye, and before you know it, he's battling possessed superpowered humans, miniature martial arts experts, his own teammates, and even his own father to try to prevent a full-scale alien invasion. Just another day at the office, I guess. I said earlier that Peacemaker works best because it manages to find just the right balance of dark, violent humour and serious drama. It never takes itself entirely seriously, and there's plenty of gags and moments that had me laughing out loud, but it also never descends into complete farce either. Just like with the Suicide Squad, there's actual stakes and consequences involved. Characters can and will die in the course of the series, and for the most part, they're well written enough that you genuinely feel invested in what happens to them. Harcourt acts as an on-off love interest for Peacemaker. She's tough and no-nonsense on the surface, but there's a more compassionate, vulnerable side that gradually comes out to make her more than just a generic, strong female character who the script desperately wants you to like but actually turns out to be a complete bitch. Vigilante is a psychotic serial killer with the cheery, upbeat personality of an Applebee's waiter, and there's one absolutely bonkers scene where he happily executes an entire family with a sniper rifle as casually as a man ticking off his grocery lists. Peacemaker himself was given a lot more depth and character development than it was obviously possible to do in a 2-hour movie, and while there's times when the show definitely goes too far, like having him literally burst into tears because everyone on the team fucking hates him, generally I think it does a decent job of exploring why he is the way he is. He's a man whose worldview has been twisted by his father's hatred, haunted by his actions in the Suicide Squad, and he's beginning to rethink who and what he actually wants to be. And credit to John Cena, he does a pretty good job with the material he's been given. This show asks a lot more of him as an actor than the movie ever did, and it all could have fallen apart if he wasn't able to deliver, but mostly he's way better than a former wrestler with limited experience has any right to be. Apparently Gunn was even inspired to write this show because Cena surprised him with his ability to deliver serious moments. Probably the biggest surprise for me was Adebayo. I mean, if I told you the show's cast included a body-positive black lesbian who sets Peacemaker right about the destructive influence of his racist father, then you'd probably roll your eyes and dismiss her as a walking instrument of the message. But in reality, she comes across as flawed, human, and likeable, a good person constantly torn between duty and loyalty, and her unlikely friendship with Peacemaker forms the emotional heart of the show. And apart from a couple of cringe-inducing lines about white privilege that are delivered with all the subtlety of a chainsaw shaped like a unicorn's erection, I think Gunn actually did a really good job with her. Speaking of which, this is James Gunn's first attempt to write a TV show, and honestly, I think his directing and writing style transfers over perfectly to the new format. Peacemaker moves along at a good breezy pace, there's very few scenes that feel redundant or bloated, the action is wonderfully violent and gory, and the dialogue is fucking great. Listening to the team bitch and snipe at each other as they run into setbacks or try to figure out their next move is almost as fun as watching Cena blast people's heads apart with a fucking shotgun. All the usual James Gunnisms are present and correct here. Characters doing goofy dances to classic rock songs? Check. Over-the-top fight scenes? Check. Fast-paced insults and one-liners? Check. This is all good stuff, but like I said earlier, there's a few moments that drag the show down a little. While plenty of the jokes land, there's others that don't, and the script sometimes falls into the trap of trying to push unfunny gags way past their sell-by date in the hopes that they'll somehow become funny through sheer fucking determination. There was clearly an attempt to strike some kind of balance in terms of where the show positions itself, and to be fair, it does try to mock some of the more ridiculous excesses of woke culture, but you can tell Gunn's heart isn't really in it, like he's afraid to stray too far down that particular path. Can't have a mainstream Hollywood production that goes too far off message, can we? But on the flip side, it fully embraces all the usual talking points you'd expect in mainstream entertainment. White privilege, the patriarchy, racism, it's all gleefully preached about here. Like Harcourt bitching about how annoying it is to be constantly hit on by guys at bars when she just wants to drink alone. Oh no, it must be such a burden being a stunningly beautiful young woman that's highly attractive to the opposite sex. Try being a fucking ugly man without a pot to piss in and watch how quickly the world stops giving a shit about you. Or Peacemaker's father being a white supremacist, and holy shit does the script go all in on this one. Literally, there's not a single moment where the script stops to ask how or why he ended up like this, or show even the slightest redeeming quality to the guy. He's just evil through and through, and that's it. Or an alien who claims to be saving the human race from greed, avarice, and science deniers. I wonder if that could be a reference to something. Oh James, there's times when I think you're pretty cool, and other times when I realise you've spent a little bit too long in Hollywoods. Now, these are gripes to be sure, but in the great scheme of things, they're relatively minor irritations, and they shouldn't take away from the fact that Peacemaker is a pretty fucking entertaining show that's miles ahead of any of the garbage being spewed out onto Disney+. There's better ways to spend 8 hours for sure, like sampling fine cognac in the company of beautiful young ladies, but there's also much worse ways, like waking up on the kitchen floor in a puddle of your own urine. But as far as entertainment goes, well, I reluctantly give Peacemaker a thumbs up. Anyway, that's all I've got for today. Go away now.